so close, quarantine. You can share from a distance, quarantine. You know we want to see each other. You'll have to stay in your quarantine space while we talk.
Welcome to, this is now the 5th version of Quarantine that we've done. We started just a couple of weeks ago when we realized that we would all kind of be in quarantine, and that was changing a lot of our social habits, but also an awful lot of the world of innovation was kind of snapping to with all sorts of things that were going on in the activist community, the arts community, the deep science community, and that's really what we're here to talk about. We've been doing this about twice a week. And, you know, like all of these mechanisms that are going on in the middle of this pandemic, we're finding our oats and finding how do we communicate and build community in a time of massive change. We have a website now, so you can find us at quarantime.today, QUARANTIME.today. That's where we have our previous shows and what's coming up. Today's show, we've titled today's show about what's on our minds. It's kind of the collective unconscious of things that we're thinking about and adapting to. We'll be speaking to Erica Blair, whose work with the Distance Resistance and Quaranteams site has brought together a group of people around the world that are creating a set of initiatives. Probably one of the best examples of innovators just coming together. So we'll be talking to Erica a little bit later. Bonni Bough will be joining us. Bannen is one of the world's great marketers. He created the Cleveland Hustle with LeBron James. And Bannen and Mickey and I are all going to talk a little bit about getting closer to family, and an important time because things are much more fragile. And both Mickey and Bannen have older dads and have wonderful stories to tell. And then we're going to talk to Elsie Bauer about what's cooking. You know, last time we had Ted Linhart on from NBC. How was TV changing? But boy, is food changing a lot today because everybody's home cooking. Not everybody knows how to cook. And Elsie started one of the world's top food blogs, Simply Recipes. And we're actually going to serve dinner tonight. Elsie, why don't we bring you in? Are you there, Elsie Bauer? Let's see. Here's Elsie. Okay. Hello, Elsie.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Well, Elsie, you're speaking to us from your kitchens in Sacramento.
I am.
And towards the end of the show, we're going to bring you in for a recipe to tell us how to use all that tuna we stocked up on.
Exactly. We're going to be making a tuna pasta with tomatoes and olives. And it's actually a recipe I developed for Simply Recipes. It's on that site if you want to find it. But I think, Peter, you will link to it.
Yeah.
You use tuna, tomatoes, olives, little Parmesan, and pasta. I mean, it's a very simple recipe. It comes together in less than half an hour.
And the reason we're bringing you on now is you're going to start cooking and putting things together, but then we're going to leave you alone and we're going to see what you come up with. And I appreciate the fact that a pasta takes less time than we're all going to talk. So we trust you to make a really good dish. And then we're going to learn about how the food world is changing, tips for people who haven't cooked but have to, and some other treats. So we'll see you in a little bit.
Great.
Take care. Okay. And now we'll bring in Mickey McManus, who is my co-host. Hi, Mick.
Hey, Peter. I'm not sure if my audio is working. Can you hear me?
Oh, you sound fabulous today.
Oh, delightful. Okay. Yeah. And we also do have the sort of infinite whiteboard that we're going to be using today as we kind of experiment. I think probably within a week or two, we're going to do a session that is about pulling all the threads from the different sessions we've had so far into, from the different pieces of the whiteboard and doing a little bit of a sort of what we would call affinity diagram, looking for what the affinities are between the various threads that we've been talking about. I'm pretty excited though that we have Elsie here and Bannen and all the guests. I'm looking forward explicitly and very particularly to talking to Bannen just because he's a good friend and we've spent a lot of time with his dad, and he's going to be talking about capturing a 92-year lifespan of of exploration with photography and just his journey with his dad. And he and my son and his dad have gone on father-son adventures around the world. And usually Martin, Bannen's dad's the one that outplays us all, even at 86, 87, and 92 now. And so we really want to dig in a little bit on how do we capture memories? How do we capture the people that are around us? And how do we take advantage of this moment of relative isolation to say, let's get on the phone with our parents, with our maybe more distant relatives and others, or grandparents, and just capture bits of their lives. Just look back and remember and get the wisdom that they have. And I think that's something that Bannen's going to talk quite a lot about.
Mick, in just the last 2 minutes, we spanned from your whiteboard, the world of innovation. How do you capture teams working together?
Yeah.
And then we moved on to this very personal stories and remembering family, particularly because with COVID, people who we love may not be with us that long.
Yeah.
That span of control is actually what we're here to talk to Erica about, who has kind of created that remit for herself and her team. So welcome, Erica, to Quarantine.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So this is a story that this story, both the story of why we're all here doing this, and how people respond to this crisis, in many ways began in conversations you and I had. I mean, at first, and I want you to just walk us through this. At first, as this was just getting organized, you and a group of people put together Distance Resistance, which of course wasn't to resist distance, it was to resist social distancing while maintaining distance. And then one Saturday night, I guess 2 Saturdays ago, maybe that would make it about 13 days ago, you called up and said, a bunch of us are getting together and we have to start a global social media effort to get people to stay home. And on that call, we came up with this idea that it's like, loose ships sink ships and all of this stuff. So walk us through kind of what you've created, but also the scope of the team. And then I want to move on to this mapping project that you're doing.
Yeah,
so welcome.
Absolutely. So thank you. Yeah, I feel like coronavirus land, everything moves. It's quite incredible how much has already gone down. Essentially what happened was when I saw what was changing in the world, as somebody who is an event producer and as well as basically, I always say that I reverse engineer connection and I reverse engineer emotional resonance, and that's my line of work in doing brand messaging and in doing experience design. I saw all of the tools that I typically use to bring people closer evaporating. And so I wanted to gather together with other people who wanted to figure out how to operate in this new context and remake the way that we were connecting with each other, so that we could maintain those bonds and maintain, kind of take the threads of what we knew to be true about how humans connect, and move them into virtual spaces to a greater degree than we already had. And so what we started thinking about, first Distance Resistance, I launched it, I believe it was March 9th. So it's not even a month old yet. But that ended up becoming this amazing chamber for people to really get vulnerable with each other. It's a Facebook group. I ask a lot of questions, and I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for people to really understand what is this experience feeling like for other people. What are considerations about how you could connect in this new context, and that was sort of the first toe in the water.
And by the way, that site itself split into different things, right? There was video viewing, there was kind of like self-help or self-care stuff, right? It spawned a number of conversations.
Yeah, and it's a Facebook group, so it just continues to have a life of its own far outside of me. And that was my first toe in the water because that is the area that I was already most familiar with. When I started to grapple with the enormity of the situation, I started to realize that there was a lot other things I wanted to focus on as well. And that ultimately, if we're talking about how to mitigate the long-term negative repercussions of this moment, that there was some things that had to be done on a short-term timeline to prevent a lot of the second, third, fourth order effects from being super devastating. And so what we started to do as a team of people who, a lot of us have a deep background in marketing, in psychology, in thinking through how do people make decisions, how do social signals get formed, what actually creates behavior change. We looked for ways to take all of that knowledge and apply it to this moment and think, okay, well, if we understand these principles to be true about how people operate and how behavior changes, how can we use that to actually move the needle right now? Quickly realizing that social proof was one of the most important elements of whether or not people were deciding to stay home, and that ultimately the people who were choosing not to stay home were by their very who were choosing to stay home were by their very definition invisible, and that to illuminate and to give visibility to that choice was a tool that we could use to help shift perceptions about what was normal and what was needed. Especially, like, I know I had the feeling of walking around San Francisco before lockdown was announced, and in my head I knew what was kind of unfolding, and yet life on the streets looked pretty normal, and so it was easy to have some cognitive dissonance around what to do. And so we wanted to make the message to stay home louder. That was sort of the launch of Quarantine. Peter, you were part of that, and we ended up launching this Facebook profile frame campaign that has now been translated into 30 different languages. Sheryl Sandberg herself has used our frame. We've now got Facebook recommending the frame to people. So what started as a grassroots effort has now been promoted within the internal organization of Facebook as something worth distributing and promoting. And so we've gotten really good traction with that campaign. And what that kind of led to was, you know, we understood that we needed to, at the very beginning, kind of do the actions that would move the needle the most in terms of just reducing death toll. And so that was our sole focus for some time. That being said, my larger vision with Distance Resistance and with all of the work that I and Quarantine now are doing is to really think about technology and how it mediates and can be useful in helping people connect. And so we've moved into some other initiatives that I'd be happy to explain also, if you're thinking that it's time to launch into that, Peter.
Well, first of all, talk a little bit about the teams globally that have connected, because one of the things that's going on right now is that, you know, as we don't have the physical friction of having to get an airplane or go to a conference, almost anyone in the world in a set of connections is now possible to do something. And so it's like the world is one great flat file system of possibility. So that actually requires a great deal of organization. And you and Patricia and your team is particularly good at that. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of people who showed up, right? Because we have Tim Chang, who's a VC there connecting to the tech community. We've got Tristan Harris, who normally is on the side of, you know, concerns with Facebook and humane technology, but this is a great moment for that. And then you've got teams all over the world. So talk a little bit about the kind of people who are coming up, and then we can talk a little bit about these initiatives that got spawned.
Yep. So, you know, I think your framing around the opportunity of this moment is really valuable, because what I've been finding, at least, is this is a really unprecedented time where, one, every single human that exists on the earth is noticing the same things, is concerned about the same kind of common enemy, and is interested in thinking about how to improve quality of life and conditions for people, right? This is an unprecedented moment where we are all aligned around what issues, what the meta issue that is important. That we may have different interests in how to approach that and different ideas of solutions, but I've never seen a moment where truly the entire globe is focused on how to help with a very uncertain number of conditions that need to be understood. And so there's sort of like a dual thing happening where everybody is very, very interested in doing something, but most people are having some challenges in figuring out exactly what it is that they could be working on or where they could be putting their energy and their time to move the needle. And so, I kind of saw that emerging and felt very fortunate because most of us on the leadership team at Quarantine have been working together already to design systems for decentralized collaboration. We've grown out of the blockchain industry. We've spent the 9 months speccing out an entire project around how to propose initiatives and then gather people from around the world to work on world-changing initiatives together. So this is already a line of thinking that we within Quarantine had spent a lot of time on over the years. And so basically we were able to import those frameworks that we've been building straight into the organization that is now needed to support the relief efforts that we're undertaking.
I'm curious, you mentioned that before this, the team that was working on this was really focusing in on these platforms like the blockchain-based things or token-based systems. Can you just, for the listeners and the watchers out there that have no idea what you're saying when you say blockchain, could you give a sense of why does that matter? Why was that a platform that might really help?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into blockchain because actually I think blockchain is the opposite of what we're interested in building with right now.
Interesting. Okay.
It's very slow and impracticable. What I take from the blockchain industry, which is, a lot of people know it by cryptocurrency, which is what you could consider an app on blockchain. Blockchain is mechanisms to use basically decentralization to make decisions and to think about how to operate in a way where you're not imbuing a central body with all of the power to.
So it's really that decentralization part that you really like, or that ability to kind of say, hey, everyone at the edges actually is getting real world experience. How do we help them make decisions there? And how do we aggregate that? Because one of the things about the tokenomic kind of space is that this is about distributed indexing, and it's sort of allows you to basically do things at the edges and store that information all over the place, kind of thing.
I would say that the top thing that I've taken from that line of work that I've been in for the last few years has been basically being able to go there mentally and think about what would the world look like if every system operated on a completely different paradigm that revolved around completely different incentive structures. And I'm finding, for a lot of us who have invested heavily in thinking through decentralization and visionary futuristic systems design, this is the moment where those of us who have already been living in that space mentally are getting an opportunity to say, hey, like the rest of the world is now just getting this first initial jolt that things need to change. Whereas there are those of us who have been spending years designing what that system would look like, and we just didn't have enough use cases and we didn't have a strong enough pain for there to be a reason to switch to a lot of the solutions that we've been proposing. And so there's a really interesting opportunity to move into a space and to have new leadership amongst people who are already deep into futuristic visionary systems design, and to say, hey, you've already got a lot of bandwidth put into thinking about these problems. How about you come be the people that design the solutions rather than people who have been thinking in the old paradigms? I think this is a really powerful moment.
Erica, could you tick off, there's like 5 or 6 initiatives going on there. Maybe you could list them, and then I want to jump into this initiative that's focused on second order effects, and then the use case you're doing that's going to be around preparing for grief, of which there will be much soon.
So the biggest initiative that we're running within Quarantine right now, which I'm heading up, is a user psychology map. Basically, one of the things that we've been doing is convening leadership from various tech platforms, major tech platforms, to think about how we can help them and how we can help them better understand this moment. And what we've heard consistently is that just like everybody else, the people who are working on major tech platforms are also having trouble parsing this moment, figuring out what is hyper relevant, figuring out what they need to be thinking through and what's going to be changing in a month or 2 months time, so that they can start making changes within their platforms to be maximally helpful at this period. And I think that's a really huge opportunity. Like I see an opportunity to really shape the direction that technology goes in the future. And yet what I'm finding is that people who are building products and are usually solving a certain set of problems. And when that entire problem set has shifted because world events have shocked the system and your users are no longer coming to your platform with the same psychology that they were coming to before, then you need to have a map and an understanding of what's changed so that you can respond accurately and so that you can think through important considerations. So an easy example, a very obvious example, is like what happens now that we are going 100% certainly going to be experiencing mass death in a moment where funerals and gathering and all of the tools that we have for addressing that kind of challenge are taken from us. And what that will necessitate is, platforms like, say, Facebook to think through, okay, like people are going to be using Facebook for funerals, for grieving, right? How can they understand what's happening for people so that they can right now, before this wave hits, get ready, get prepared, adapt their products. And so that was sort of the main focus of what we're doing. I'm going to get to what you're showing in a second, Peter. There's actually there's a few levels before that. So in sort of working backwards, right, we're thinking about how do we map the psychology of users right now so that platforms, and then really anybody who wants to understand how psychology is shifting, any product designer, any marketer, we're going to open source everything we produce, right, can have guideposts to help them think through what are design shifts that might need to happen in this context. What are different approaches that might be more helpful or more harmful in a context where people are experiencing mass grief and where we're not given the typical tools to deal with that.
I wonder too, Erica, with this mass grief stuff. I mean, obviously, generations that are still around here have already been through this before. We don't always listen to them. They're like our grandparents or our dads or moms or things like that, and in some cases, great grandparents. How are we preparing both for that side of it, which is we're probably going to lose a bunch of them, unfortunately, because of the shape of this disease. But we have people who have actually been there and experienced the Vietnam War and finding out their kids didn't make it, or experienced World War II, or were raised by people who did, and really see that. How are we enlisting the other generations? I think one of the things I see a lot is we get all excited about this and we have a lot of context, but we're the ones that happen to be on the social platforms or something, and I'm not a good representative of this because I've got gray hair, but there might be people who are like pretty young and excited, and I want them, but how do we actually tap in the other generations to actually help us innovate? Because they've got some wisdom that just came from surviving for this long and actually going through pretty heavy grief.
So I think there's two dimensions to what you're talking about. One is that we do have precedents for some of the elements of what we're experiencing, and the kind of the entire point of the user psychology map is to go interview people who understand what are the considerations and bring those insights to the people who are building the products who may not have that kind of depth of knowledge and experience. That being said, there was no internet, and there was no forced isolation, and there was no, there are a tremendous number of differences between this moment and any other moment that need to be taken into account. And so the models that we have are a good jumping off point, but they're not sufficient to help us think through the psychology and the product considerations of this moment, which is why we've it kind of as the phase 0 to being able to even undertake this user psychology map. We've launched an effort and combined efforts with some other groups to really start thinking about what is specifically unique and what are the effects of this particular moment and of the coronavirus context. And that's this second order effects project that you were showing earlier, Peter. this is an effort that wasn't started by me. This was started by Michael Simmons and Emerson Spartz, and they basically just started mapping everything that was in their brains around what are the second order effects of coronavirus. And it's become this big collaborative effort, which now, as of very recently, we've decided to funnel as much thinking toward this project, toward this mapping project that they're doing as possible, because, you know, having two people's brains downloaded is great, but that's not the whole picture. And so what I'm doing now is thinking about how do we solicit people with different areas of expertise to come help us just brainstorm and map out every single possible area of second order effects from this virus that will allow us to get a sense of what are the buckets of considerations that we should even go deeper into and start raising and doing psychological examinations for, so that we can better inform the platforms. And so I've actually got something that I have a link that I'll share in the chat. It's bit.ly/second order project. And that is the brief for our call for participation, and it has all of the different the ways that we're collecting information around how to participate in this project. Right.
I think one of the interesting things about this is one of these examples where you need almost simultaneous, rapid, multidisciplinary things going on, right? So here's a problem case that didn't exist a month ago, and it's suddenly global. And so part of this is how do you get all these disciplines to work on it? For example, Mick, you know, last week we had Ting Zhang on from the Center for Advanced Hindsight, and this is kind of behavioral science looking at how do you bring about behavior change at scale, and how do you run experiments. And then you've got...
This is my whole way of dealing with behavior change at the moment on a Friday. I'm sorry. So, no, but, you know, Peter, I think it's a good point. You know,
yeah, but Nick, you have a beer and all I have is this lousy microphone.
Yeah, well, but you look very professional.
Yeah.
But Erica, you know, you're saying second order or third order effects, and I got a chance to look at the site earlier today, or the document, and I love it. And I guess, could you explain just to everybody what the heck is a second order effect? Like, what do we mean by this? And are there ways that Mike and Emerson have come up with to help us help contribute to them in terms of methodologies for second order effects and things?
So I think the easiest way to think about it is, what does the virus do to a body? That's a first order effect. What is everything that happens beyond the virus inhabiting a body and potentially killing that body? Those are the second order effects. And so let's say that families are grieving. That's a second order effect. And then a third order effect would be like, you know, something that came out of families grieving. And so, like, for instance, like increased usage of technological tools for family meetings, right? That would be a third order effect. What we're trying to do is less get bogged down in semantics around how do we title these things, and more, we have a massive team of people who have volunteered to organize all the information that is submitted. We want to reduce every possible area, a barrier to entry, to getting people to just type out lists of all the things that they're seeing as ripple effects from coronavirus. And we've got an incredible team that is completely volunteer labor, just wanting to help organize and facilitate communal understanding of what's happening right now, so that everybody who's in a position of decision making has the tools that they need to make more informed decisions around what's actually happening, how it's affecting people, and thereby think through the considerations of, if you're building tech products, especially those that affect 3 billion people, how can you be sensitive to this current moment? How can you understand what's going on? And how can you kind of think through whatever considerations might be necessary to be as helpful as you possibly can in this moment?
I love it. I like this notion of sort of crowdsourcing, like what might be second or third or fourth order effects, and how can we help people who are either policymakers or technologists or product designers or anybody who has levers, who is going to affect us whether we like it or not, at least see this might be a second order effect or a third order effect. Beware. Or here's an opportunity for you to actually help right there with maybe new ways of helping us get over grief or even just the other dimensions that we're talking about here. I love that. It's
I
very
think
exciting.
another thing we might add also is there's something sacred about this time in that we're going through a massive change quickly. And so I think there's a lack of gravity. That is to say, we're making changes in the social safety net structure, the science structure, the media structure very rapidly and faster. And these changes we make will be sticking with us afterwards. It's the architecture we're building next. And so the faster...
Ideally.
The likelihood that will happen goes up the more that ideas are kind of shared and bubble up here. For example, Mick, you and I were on the phone earlier with a foundation leader from Pittsburgh, and we were talking about how are local nonprofits and local foundations responding. And there's so much learning coming in quickly. You kind of want to gross that up and get that on the table pretty quickly here. So
imagine. I mean, in Pittsburgh, the lines for the food kitchens go around the block. It's the most that they've ever seen. And a lot of that is, we expect volunteers to help because in some ways the government funding is not there for social service orgs. And so the lines are around there. And then the volunteers are afraid to go because they normally volunteer at food kitchens. They volunteer to actually move food around with things. There's something called 412 Food Rescue that rescues food from restaurants and grocery stores that is going or will go bad soon. And you just log in and you're told like where to bring it. The volunteers aren't showing up. Because they're afraid for their own lives. They're worried about their own family. They don't want to catch the infection. And so what we kind of almost ignore, people who need food at the food kitchens and alternate ways of doing things, it's really it's collapsing very quickly.
Another interesting thing is
that's an example of a second order effect that we love in our map. And so I think the point is that every single person's seeing a different lens on what's happening, and we're all in our own little ecosystems witnessing the changes that are occurring. And the more diverse people that we can get to contribute to this project, the more we can get a holistic understanding of what's happening and what those ripple effects are, so that we can start to take a systematic approach to figuring out solutions versus right now, every call I get on is like a million people throwing out a million things that they're seeing.
Yeah.
And we're trying to filter that and organize it and turn it into something that is tangible, usable, and actually can make a difference in the world.
Mick, this might be a great time to invite Bannen to join us before we go on to the section with the two of you. Bannen is one of our great... Hello, Bannen. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
And are you in New York today?
I am at the epicenter. I am reporting live from the epicenter of the coronavirus.
It's great. We're showing your homepage. Bannen, you are a polymath. You became very well known for early work you were doing in social media and work with food companies, and then you went on to work with LeBron James on the Cleveland Hustle, and you've kind of been at the forefront of both tech and social action. So I thought I would bring you in as we're kind of talking to Erica about organizing people around the world, because I mean this is a transformational moment for social media. We built it and we were using it in one way, perhaps a trivial way or a marketing way, and suddenly in just 2 weeks it's taken on a whole new role and new levers.
I think that I think Erica's right. I think Mickey's wrong as usual.
It's not surprising. Yeah.
But I think, Mickey, what's interesting to your point earlier, which is where do we look for a roadmap out how we understand like how we've dealt with this before. The interesting thing is like I think I mentioned to you when we talked earlier, I had my 92-year-old dad and my 92-year-old grandmother, clearly not my dad's mom, just for those that were wondering, my mom's mom, on a Zoom call. First of all, I think we broke the record for age. But yeah. I asked them, I said, was it Vietnam? Was it World War II? And they said, no, we've never seen this because, to your point, Erica, the pace, the speed at which it hit us is so, it's just unfathomable. I was on the phone with the Pepsi guys, my ex, friends, or not ex-friends, ex-company friends. And yeah, and we were talking about like, what do you do?
Bannen led digital at Pepsi and tried to kind of get that whole organization to think differently, and was one of the reverse mentors for Indra, the CEO there, that kind of helped her understand what was happening with this new crazy thing called mobile and digital.
Right.
But you still like them.
What is going on? Yeah, so I was chief digital officer at PepsiCo. chief media and e-commerce officer for Mondelez, whatever. But, you know, we're flattening the curve from a health perspective, which is the only thing we should be focused on. But as businesses, we also need to flatten the decline. And so the biggest thing is how are you going to climb out of this? And, you know, I'm in conversations, not just them, there's, you know, a number of big CMOs. Well, first, the Pepsi conversation was interesting because I said, look, we were on the phone call with the president and he said, just keep delivering water. And he said, you don't understand what that charge means. That means that we're not delivering water at the pace we used to. We are surge production. We've never seen, and at the same time, we have to social distance. At the same time, we have to create production speeds that we've never done. And we also, more importantly, and thank you to all the frontline workers and everybody who's keeping the machine running today, is they also have to make sure that those people are inspired. The truck drivers. I mean, so it's a unique situation that we've never really seen before. I mean, when you have GM in a week turning over to creating ventilators, when you have Estee Lauder turning over to creating hand sanitizer, we've never seen organizations pivot. I think there was a great meme that said, "Who drove digital?" And I'm not even a big digital transformation guy, but digital transformation faster. Was it the CEO? Was it the CMO, or was it COVID-19? And it's crazy because clearly it's COVID, right? And so it's just such a rapid shift. And the one thing I would take away from this is one-to-one connection and communication with the people who you love, with the people who you do work with your consumers. And that I think we lost in a world of trying to build mass Facebook presences, and we didn't realize that was going to hit us. But anyway, what's up, everybody? I am on day 16. My hair is crazy, and the light is dim, and I am in the epicenter. I'm holding it down for all of you guys.
It's like mood lighting or something like that. Hey, Bannen, can you so tell us about what you really want to talk about, though. So you've been on this kind of mission with your dad, with Martin,
right?
And just give us a little bit more sense of this, because I mostly just kept trying to figure out what the heck Martin was saying when we were climbing up the side of a pyramid in Guatemala or something like that.
I'm mostly on a mission to just hang out with you, Mickey. That's pretty much my single life goal. I met Mickey, I don't know, 15 years ago, and we literally had to walk away. I was like, he's too smart. It hurts my brain. He's just too smart. I was lucky enough. I've been very lucky. My dad came here from Chicago at 34. He was a jazz musician, and he was a photographer for 60 years. And my brother started posting photos on Instagram from his archive. And I had known the archive existed, and I had seen photos. And my brother calls me and goes, "Look, there's more in the archive than we know about." I was like, "Look, younger brother, I will be the judge of that." And it turns out, I thought when we first started embarking on it that there was maybe 15, maybe 30,000 photos. It turns out there's 500,000 photographs that had never been digitized in archive. And so for the last 6 months, we have been digitizing and archiving those photographs. And we had a mini army that came in to do it. We rented a space in Mercer. And it's just been amazing to have a chance to work with my dad.
He did this for 60 years. He was like a special effects photographer back when in Madison Avenue, the special effects meant like cut a piece of acrylic tubing and then like hold something out so that it looked like it was, an exploded view or something like that. And then aim the camera at it the right way. But also just, he's been living a life of jazz and all the just life, capturing
everything that you can do with filters today. He built, but what's interesting is that when I talk to him, so it's been great. I mean, it's weird to spend my time with my dad now on Zoom. I wake up at 8 a.m. I go to sleep at like midnight, and it's like family. It's like business and then family. It's weird. But what was interesting that he said was that I just hope that we appreciate human connection more than we did before. And when you look at some of the like satellite views of like China and the dissipation of pollution, and you realize that we are all, I think Erica made the point that we are all in this together, and it doesn't matter socioeconomic, it doesn't matter. We're literally, although I will say there are socioeconomic differences, but we're all in this together, and that this is humanity, and we have a chance to appreciate humanity again. And so that's what I took away from, look, a 92-year-old guy who's on dialysis, and has to leave his house every other day, and he's still with a smile on his face.
How's his brain at right now? I mean, that's tough at this moment.
I told you he it's getting his. He's like, I'm ready to die. I'm like, well, I'm not ready for you to die. So like, there's two of us in this equation, motherfucker. Like, you need to focus. So no, his brain, he's sharper than ever, man. He actually, this is crazy, and I didn't realize this. He said he lived the most healthiest lifestyle of anybody I've ever met.
Oh, for decades, yeah.
And he said, I am sharper now because I didn't realize that because my kidneys were failing, the water retention was actually on my brain as well as in my body, and now I'm actually sharper. And so he's sharper than ever before, man. I'm very blessed, So.
Well, I mean, I remember
at the same time,
he picked up a saxophone and started playing it, and just still wanting to do that right after he got out of the hospital with, pneumonia or something like that. So
he had kidney failure and he had pneumonia. I was like, really, right in the middle of Corona? Like, can I get a break here, man?
Not do that. But what surprised you about the photo library and just the process of trying to understand his life? Because a lot of this, your little brother was also helping, and you were trying to interview in some ways. What's this picture mean? Like, well, here's a picture. Here's Bannen as a kid.
Right, that's fair. Here, I'll share.
Space shuttle.
Where did you get? Where?
I can't say. I can't say.
I love you, Peter.
What were some surprises along the way, or what was something that like just made you excited that you spent time, trying to figure out how to archive this stuff or tell stories?
Are you guys seeing my screen? Let me try to play a little. Are you seeing this?
Probably not.
And there was a fire that burned down this apartment.
No. Can you send us a link or something like that?
I put on sharing.
Actually, Bannen, put the screen back up. I can put it back up, and I'll loop it in. Go ahead and put it back on.
See if you can loop it in. Did you turn on sharing? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Here. No, I know just
what real high tech, real high.
So realistic.
That's it, right?
Yeah. Now we're looking at your screen, Bannen. Do you want to play that?
All right. Good.
I remember when he did that shot. And there was a fire that burned down this apartment, and the only room that wasn't scorched was the studio with all the archives.
I don't think it's playing.
So realistically, 20 years
not
ago,
playing?
all of this could have been decimated.
No, I think what's happening is did you turn on your PowerPoint?
You've selected a screen, and we hear sound, but visually you selected the wrong screen because somehow you picked up you didn't pick up the output of PowerPoint. By the way, I've been through this, Bannen, last week. And that's one of the reasons that on today's show, Mohib, who's in Phoenix, is actually calling all the shots of putting everything up because that's television.
Trying to distribute this.
Okay, I see your screen again. Let's try this now. Is that it?
You see it?
There it is. You're on.
When he did that shot. And there was a fire that burned down this apartment, and the only room that wasn't scorched was the studio with all the archives in it. So realistically, 20 years ago, all of this could have been decimated.
This is street photography. So we got a little bit of a mixed bag here. I have this philosophy. There are pictures happening around me all the time. And that, to me, that is the one thing the camera does. It stops time. Can I capture it at this moment? That's what's appealing about it.
So I shared that with the audience for two reasons. One, because I have a bet with my younger brother of who can get the most Instagram shares for his dad. And the good news is that I'm doing all the live shows, so I'm trying to win this. So please follow him on Instagram. But, you asked me a question. It almost brings tears to my eyes just watching that. But the reality, the biggest takeaway that I took from this is I used to go in on like a Saturday when nobody's there. Like we had a 5,000 square foot space. We had a lot. I mean, photographs were everywhere. Teams were going crazy trying to archive and catalog. And I would just look. And it's crazy. What we don't appreciate is how big the human experience is, how much we see in a lifetime. And what's interesting is that here you have a chance to actually physically see. And I calculated he probably took a photo every 30 seconds. Now, of course, there's a lot click, 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 click. So, it's not accurate, but every 30 seconds of his 60-year life. And that's crazy. And we don't appreciate, I think we don't spend time appreciating how deep the human experience is. And that to me was, it was really, the other piece was my mom, like I knew my mom as my mom when she was much older than when they met. And to see the photos of my mom in her younger life and to see who she was through, and unfortunately my mom's no longer with us, but to see her in that early life, it's a really special moment. The human experience is so special. And I think in some respects, and that's what I think is interesting about what's happening today, to Erica's point, is that it's touching everybody. It has an impact on everybody. And it reminds us that we are just another species on this earth. And yeah, sorry.
One of the points I was making a moment ago is if you think about if you were to put social media in kind of era one, it kind of started after the web crash around 2003, and it grew up to be something that marketers used a lot, individuals used, and then it kind of got captured and became this algorithmic thing that people like Tristan Harris and Roger McNamee complained about, right? So that, and then we were, as we headed into this crisis, we were sitting there thinking, what will happen in the elections next? Are bots going to capture us? What's authentic or not? So we're having that conversation. Then this thing comes in, and we're using these media differently. We're now completely overwhelmed with, everybody has a feed. There's Zooms coming. The amount of inbound in my email is crazy. But we're also learning to do things like have our dinner parties with this. We're learning to have, multiple rooms. So for kind of like regular parties. So you're like both a scholar and an experimentalist on social media. The way we're using it and is different. And also it either portends something better coming out of it, or it portends going back to where we were.
Look, when I quit Mondelez, it was to invest in messaging technologies. And everybody told me I was crazy. Why would you leave a job? Like I was the 7th largest media buyer on planet Earth. I mean, Oreo, Wheat Thins, Cadbury. I mean, you name said brand, like we were their largest snack food company in the world. Everybody's like, you're crazy. What are you doing? I said, I just believe that this one-to-one communication channel is much bigger than we ever thought. And now, if you go to any company and go, hey, if you had the phone number of every single consumer that you ever saw, would you be happy? They'd be like, yes, I'd be happier than ever. So I'm kind of like, I got it, one. But I think for me, the bigger piece of it, I don't know, it's going to have, like Erica said, and I think Mickey, you said it too, is that it's going to have systematic impact on how we operate as a culture. But I think more than anything, I think digital and social, and we're learning, but more than that aside, it's going to remind us to appreciate human connection. So when I think about the very first Zoom meeting that we did with friends, like, hey, happy hour that we did, it was a weekend. And I was like, yes, there are other people on planet Earth. I'm so happy. Now we do it, and we do it twice a week. And it's still great because I get to see my friends, and it's amazing. And, Peter, you're not invited, but the reality is more and more, it makes me remember how important human connection is, and the fact that we are physical beings that need to be connected. And so I think in a strange way, it's going to create new behaviors and habits in the digital channels. But I think even more, it's going to create an appreciation for the fact that I can shake somebody's hand again. And I think that and reminding us that we are all in this together, and it doesn't really matter. And that's I think
this notion of just, we're probably going to have actually, some people are predicting, well, we just won't ever touch anything ever again. Yeah, finally. Okay. I won't be the only one. But I think there might be a reflexive kind of like, yes, I want to go just hug somebody.
I hug my dad more now than ever, man.
Yeah, more than ever. And I also think that people are starting to experiment with getting past the shiny object of Zoom, or the shiny object of, oh, look, I changed my background. I think what's happening now, and I started seeing this, there's Dan Ariely's lab. We had Ting on last week from Dan's lab, the Center for Advanced Hindsight. And their Irrational lab created a deck of cards so that you don't have small talk anymore. Like that you don't have small talk. So you flip the card and it says, what kind of thoughts would you make illegal and why? And that's like, whoa, okay, I'm not ready for that question. But I tried it out this morning in a meeting. I was just like, oh, I'm going to tell me the number of cards to flip down. I flipped down to like 16, and I just read it, and then we had to answer the question. What was the last time you did something for the first time? Bannen, what was the last time you did something for the first time?
The last time I did something for the first time was hug my wife and tell her that she's the most important person in this world. No, I didn't really have a choice because I'm quarantined with her, but I'm just saying, like, no, I'm joking. But all jokes aside, like, the reality is that, like, when's the last time you told the people you love that you really truly love them?
Yeah.
And that's been the interesting thing about this. Like, even friends, like, I'm texting people, like, I did a shot, like, and that was the first shot. And then I did the one human, and I did the one lost as fuck, and I'm sending that photo to people. I'm just going through my text. People I haven't talked to them for fucking ever. And I'm just sending them that. And they're like, thank you. But, and then I'm getting inbounds from people who I know that we are connected and we're really good friends, but we haven't talked to them forever. And they're just like, yo, are you good? And that is a weird thing. And to your point, what have I done? And I haven't done in a long time. I haven't reached out to everybody who I really care about and said, hey, I care about you.
Bannen, on this serious note, this whole question of what did we do for the first time, I'd like to share with you what I did for the first time.
Oh, God.
What?
I saw this.
Well, Mohib, we need audio to do this.
I saw this. It was
it was very funny, but Mohib, okay, the joke here was we're supposed to go right to something, but there's no audio to it. Yeah, so we'll let.
It looks like you're painting your face.
Yeah, well, it's very true. So Mohib, why don't you get the audio ready? And I think the issue there.
What I was wondering is who's painting you? Like, who has enough? Who is willing to be in a room with you during quarantine?
Who's actually quarantined with him, probably.
That's why you need protection.
All right, we should stop this bit right.
Try it one more time, Omid, and then Mohib, and then we'll see.
It's actually pretty funny.
Yeah. Okay. We'll give it one more shot. Go ahead.
Good evening. People have asked me, Pete, how do I prepare for this COVID bad flu thing? Okay, the first thing you have to understand is where it comes from. It was created by 5G energy, a government conspiracy. It started in China. And have you noticed that the sun goes from that direction to our direction? Yeah. And the sun itself is made from a giant hydrogen bomb, radiation. Is anyone talking about that? I don't think so. That's why you need protection. The kind of protection I'm putting on right now. COVID goo stops everything. It's going to stop me in my tracks, and it can stop you too, especially if you order some. So remember, it may not be good out there, but with COVID goo, how bad can it get? Text me, and you'll get a batch. You missed a bit. I got to protect all.
Trying.
All right, fine.
Not bad.
But you didn't give a phone number. Where do I text? I'm just trying
to close the deal, Peter.
Well, this is where we turn to Bannen. Bannen is one of our great consumer packaged good people and creator and incubator. So I'm just pitching this your way to start it up.
You're trying to get it going. Get goo.
Okay.
Hey, let's get.
I think it's time to move on to Elise.
Let's get some food going. Yeah. Our last little segment is going to be with Elise.
On this show, you don't even get a shot. You don't even get a chance to tell Elise.
Bannen, I went to Elise before. Elise is was the founder of Simply Recipes, one of the nation's top scratch cooking sites. It was so popular, it got bought. And we asked Elise to join us tonight because the world of food is something that's changing a great deal in all of this. We have people at home who don't know how to cook, who need to learn to cook. We have people at home who've run out of flour, and you have to explain to us what the hell happened to flour, who have to do things differently. Right. So maybe you could take us through in the world, in the food social media world, what's going on, what are people looking at? And, as Bannen points out, this has been a 2 weeks of enormous change.
Hey, Elise, such a pleasure meeting you. Everybody, I'm going to leave. It was such an amazing time with you guys, and I'm hungry, so maybe I'll try to follow on and try to cook something that you show.
If you follow, you're going to see that Elise is going to be showing us tuna a la Quarantime. It is the tuna dish that uses up all those cans that you went out and bought. Elise, back to you.
Hey, Peter, I'm almost done with this recipe. Can I like show people how I'm finishing it, and then we can talk about
Absolutely. Hey, you're the chef.
move this around. So my kitchen over here, and what I did in this pot is I cooked down 2 cans of tuna with some shallots and garlic, and then added a can of crushed tomatoes and a 1/4 cup of chopped olives. And I think that's all that's in here. Some salt and pepper. And while everyone else was chatting away, I boiled some pasta, which is now draining. And it's hot, so I want to add that in. And it's really, this is a recipe that Peter's linked to. It uses pretty much all pantry ingredients. Once you mix the tuna and tomatoes in with the pasta, then all you have to do is add a little bit of Parmesan cheese, or to serve, and parsley. There we go. That's it. Now that's my dinner for tonight. That was my pantry cooking. Super, super easy. Takes 30 minutes.
What do you call this, Elise?
Pardon?
What's the name of this recipe?
It's called tuna pasta with tomatoes and olives. Olive quarantine.
Olive quarantine. I like that. Okay.
Actually, it's just tuna pasta with tomatoes and olives. There we go. So I just wanted to finish that because it's been cooking while y'all have been talking, and I've been listening.
So first of all, what's going on in the online food blogosphere site? Is traffic up? What are people looking at?
So everyone's at home, and the restaurants are mostly closed. Some are open for takeout. So basically what's happening right now is that the recipe websites, cooking websites, the traffic has pretty much doubled from what it would normally be at this time. It's sort of like Thanksgiving every day in the food blogosphere and with food cooking sites. As you would expect, right? So, and the other thing that's happening is that the people that produce this food content, cooks, cookbook authors, bloggers, anyone who's in the food publishing business, they are also stuck at home. And so they are spending a lot more time showing people online what they're doing. In fact, I think I can speak for a lot of us that we feel it's part of our mission to help educate and inspire people to cook healthful foods at home, do good cooking at home. And so now here we are on Instagram, on Facebook, doing live cooking shows, not shows, but just like what I was doing while you guys were talking, showing people how to make simple and easy recipes. And so we're just seeing a ton more of that happening right now. I think I mentioned to you earlier, Peter, that there's a friend of mine, David Leibowitz, who is a former chef from Chez Panisse, and he's a cookbook author. He is doing Instagram lives every morning on West Coast time and noon New York time, and it's 6:00 p.m. Paris time where he is, and he has cocktail hour. And he just wrote a cocktail book, and so let's see, I think I have this book right here, and there's David.
And here he is here, Chef Panisse. So, or David, so it's he what's the book about exactly?
It's this one. This is his latest book. I think it's like his 4th or 5th or 6th book. It's called Drinking French, and it's just it's not all cocktails. There's like hot chocolate. There like lots of non-alcoholic, but he goes into depth about different famous French cocktails, chartreuse and Key Royale and things like that, and works. Has interviewed the people that make the liqueurs. It's really, really interesting.
Can I point out this? There's a lovely ritual thing about this, which is in the middle of this crisis, we could all be in our pajamas and eat cereal all day, or we could get dressed, putting on some perfume, cook French, and then have something cool to drink. And there is something nice about this. Well, we have a
friend. You can connect. You can connect with friends while you're doing this through either Instagram Live or Facebook Live. And there's just so much more of that happening right now.
I like this idea, though, of actually taking, like, let's say a recipe that everybody in a whole, across the world maybe has at least enough. I've got some cans of tuna, I've got the whatever. And then everyone spends a little time in the kitchen, and then we all sit here and actually eat it together. So we're like, or maybe the delivery cart shows up, and we could all order the same meal and then all eat that for dinner. Because I do think the value of ritual, right? That's it's not going to go away anytime soon. This is just deeply part of us. And
it's also, think about what food is. Food is about nourishment. It's about nourishing our bodies and nourishing our hearts. It's about love. It is how we show love to our families. It's how we show love to ourselves. It's through this nourishment. And so it's not generally a solitary activity. I mean, it's about community and family. And so for people who may feel disconnected, being able to come together through technology to be able to share some of these experiences with their friends and family members who are in a different place is really wonderful.
Well, and I think this notion of you get together and, okay, you chop the cucumbers and I'll do this and I'll do that. And I'm not a cook, but I love eating. And just having friends that know how to cook, but they put me to work. And I feel like I'm helping in some ways, and we're not getting.
Absolutely. Look, I tell you, there is.
Yeah, go ahead.
You don't want to. There's nothing that makes me happier than cooking something and giving it to someone and saying, "Taste this." And when they taste it, the light in their eyes, it's like that is like, yes, that is what makes me happy. That is what I live for.
Can I bring up a related factor here? Maybe something we talk about a lot. Food is often about improv and jazz. Sometimes there's this orthodoxy that we're only going to cook what Elise officially tells us is how we do it. But in fact, playing around, playing with your food, playing with recipes, and also in this moment where there may not be flour, so improvising, it's a great moment for improvising. So I have a question for you, Elise. There's certain stuff that people can't get. Like I gather we're out of flour and people like to bake. Yes. So what isn't there, and what's your advice for what to do about that?
Okay, so one, you have to work with what you've got, right? And two, there's some things that you still need, and I'm asking my own market folks, like, when do you expect this to come in, and when should I be at the store in order to get it? So a lot of stores are out of flour, for example. And a lot of what's happening right now is that a lot more people are baking right now than they would normally, probably because they're stuck at home. And so the demand for flour has gone through the roof, and that one is a difficult one to find. So, and with some of those, you can substitute different types of flours, like almond flour or gluten-free flour or tapioca flour or oat flour. Or if you even have like Quaker oats, you can put that in a food processor and grind that up until you have something that looks kind of flour-like, but also know that those things don't have gluten, so you have to kind of adjust recipes. So there's a lot of questions that we're getting now about substitutions. So I have a pretty popular banana bread recipe out there on Simply Recipes, and we're getting questions like, well, can I make this with oat flour, or can I make it with almond flour? Because they don't have flour. And yeah, you can. It may not hold up as well, so you might want to add another egg to it to give it a little bit more structure. There are things that you can do to balance recipes to make up for ingredients that you don't have.
We talk a lot about the maker movement, jumping in, building respirators and things like that. But like one of the original maker movements was, my mom's cooking and being able to like actually just go into the kitchen and make something for myself. And I think, often that's just like the first place, the first chance. Here's a place. I used to be a fellow at a place called Autodesk, and we have this Instructable site, and what's the most fun is probably Halloween, because people like actually make weird things, eyeball salad and things like that out of eggs.
Yeah, or like jack-o'-lantern quesadillas.
But it's a way for people to like feel like they made something, and then to your point, it's a very different, it's a not digital experience at all. It's digital like your fingers maybe, but it's about the senses. And I love that. Just
sensory, it's tactile, it's somatic, it's it's a wonderful antidote from being in front of a computer to actually get up and cook something. And
Speaking about things that that we may do when this ends and we all get together. At least you may not know about this about me, but I've been running San Francisco's leading Brussels sprout soirees, competitive Brussels sprouts cooking. The Brussels sprout, as you know, is a tabula rasa. On its own, it doesn't have much to say, and its flavor is what you imbue it with. So that gives people a big opportunity to come up with what it is, whether they're adding hot sauce, vodka, something mushrooming, or whatever. Now, we won't go into that tonight, but who is the French cook, the guy doing cocktails?
That's David Leibowitz.
David has something to say about this with the Kir Royale, something you'd think has to be formal, but according to David, you can do it your way. Mohib, let's roll that.
Oh, like that. The Kir Royale, nobody usually measures anything. The Kir is named after Felix Kir, who was a priest in France, in Burgundy, and he became part of the resistance against the Nazi occupation. He was very active in the resistance. After the war, he became mayor of Dijon. Dijon is where a lot of blackcurrant liquor is from and made, and I'll talk about those in just a minute, different regions and so forth. But he promoted blackcurrant liquor after the war. He was very into like getting the word out, selling this creme de cassis, getting the word out. And so they named the drink after him because he was such a promoter of people using the blackcurrant liqueur. The other story that you don't hear as often as that one, which is most likely true, was that a lot of people in the region grew these grapes to make aligoté wine. And it was considered kind of not very good wine. It was sort of thin and acidic and not very interesting. So they would add a creme de cassis to it to make it drinkable. And that's the other story about why Bourgogne aligoté, not aligot. Aligot is the potatoes that you stretch. A lot of people get it confused, but there's a accent after the E, so it's aligoté. This is the traditional wine that you use.
Okay, so we can go on from there. But the point is that on anything that we could imagine, there's a great story and a great improv in front of us.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Another thing I was thinking also about the whole idea around about cooking as a creative act. It's also an act of impermanence. When you think about those Tibetan monks that create the big mandalas that take 2 weeks to make in beautiful different color sand, and then they come and they sweep it all away as an exercise in impermanence. Well, guess what? That's what cooking is like, except you get to do it every time you cook.
We have a special treat and a special guest tonight. I mentioned Brussels sprout soirees a moment ago. The co-creator of Brussels sprout soirees with me happens to be our very same Anna Fedorova, who is managing our community here at Quarantime. So Anna, first of all, what can you add to what we were doing with Brussels sprouts? And then you could tell us what the audience has been saying, and we can help wrap up tonight's show.
Well, the Brussels sprouts was this very exciting phenomenon that we kind of stumbled upon just as Peter was getting into the swing of the whole Maker City narrative that he was co-creating with, the Maker City project before it even started, right? It was just his first exploration stages. And we were talking about how, food is jazz and cities are jazz. And you kind of dove deeply into the political economics of this and kind of social anthropology of this, while making Brussels sprouts with throwing all sorts of veggies in there, all sorts of spices, and the result was very strange, very jazzy, but very, very good. Just like.
And I believe we said that the Brussels sprouts themselves were like the American experience. If there's one thing that Tocqueville observed, it's that the Americans did not wait for the royals to tell them what to do. Americans formed associations to go solve a problem on their own. They didn't wait for the king. And this is certainly how we built our country, and it's how we approached Brussels sprouts. We didn't wait for a lease. We didn't look it up in the joy of anything. We improvised till we got it right. And then we moved west, which is to say we clogged up the stove, and then the western part of the house was where we had the table, and then we had dinner.
This is how we do it, guys. And so this is how we're doing it here as well, right? Like just the mixture of guests and insights and brilliance that we're bringing to the table here is certainly getting me excited, which is, you know, very much what we need right now in this very difficult time for many.
Hey, Anna, do we have any, boy, we covered a lot of terrain tonight, right? We talked to Bannen about family. We talked a lot about changes in media. Erica took us through innovation, and we've ended up on food. So I'm wondering if there's anything you want to share from the greater blogosphere or what's going on out there.
Yeah, well, I personally don't have anything to add. The thing that I really jived with, and our commenters here also did, was Bonnen's digitalizing of the family collection of photographs. I was curious, and this is for him, but maybe you guys know and can help as well, and we can post this. We will post this on our resource page on our site. What is some special advice for the best tools to digitize, family photographs?
I think we should probably ping Bannen about that, and he can answer onto the site. One of the things I strongly recommend for digitizing family experiences and memories. So it's not so much photographs. Somebody else will have to answer that question. But there's a beautiful app that everybody can download called StoryCorps, CORPS, like a conservation corps of engineers. And StoryCorps started with an Airstream in Grand Central Station, where it was an NPR project, National Public Radio, and they had 2 microphones and a beautiful little set, and they would give you questions, but they would pull people basically wandering through Central Station, and they say, could you interview each other about something in your life? And just 2 people would interview each other. So there was no interviewer, whatever. And now they've actually, on Thanksgiving, they send out a thing, and they actually publish it on the New York Times. They say, have a day of remembering. And they invite everybody to try to capture this. And all of the recordings go into the Library of Congress. So it's about kind of just American life, and actually now it's global, so it's in multiple languages. But if you download the StoryCorps app and you say, I want to interview my mom or my dad or my grandfather or my grandmother or someone in my family, or you want to have your grandkid interview somebody, it actually has a complete set of different kinds of questions, really provocative, deep questions to ask. And it's just sort of a beautiful thing. And you can choose to keep it for yourself. You can choose to post it, and it'll be part of the Library of Congress. It's up to you. But I would strongly encourage people to just download StoryCorps. And if you've never seen or heard an episode of StoryCorps on NPR, they were called Driveway Moments, because people would be driving along on a Friday afternoon listening to NPR or public television, public radio, and they would you'd stop at your house and you just sit in the driveway listening to the story, because the stories will make you cry. The stories will make you laugh. It's just a beautiful thing. There's actually a TED Talk about it by the founder, because he was given the very first TED Prize to actually turn this thing into an app. And I strongly recommend it. There's some beautiful ways of just capturing. The best thing you could do, just get on the phone with them. But also, I love this idea of capturing the pictures. And so Martin got 500,000 pictures to capture for Martin. So that's a non-trivial thing. And he's probably using some kind of crazy good technology for this. And part of the technology is just a lot of friends and interns and other things. Because we're also, I know he's interviewing Martin about the pictures. Flip them over. What happened? Why is that? Why did you keep that picture?
StoryCorps really follows in
capture.
StoryCorps follows in the tradition of it follows in the tradition of oral histories, right? Which is I think this is particularly poignant right now because there's something very ephemeral about social media, whereas an oral history is where you're going deeper and probing and asking. It's kind of like, what do you say to your grandfather when you know he may not live for a year or so, and you want to ask every question you would ask when he might not be here? And that's particularly important right now because, the estimates are that we may lose 100,000 Americans, and many of our parents or grandparents who are ill are in a much greater likelihood of this. And, I think that's something that you're worried about, Bannen's worried about. I have a mom who's 92, and,
She just
Don't let
watches
the
CNN all the time in New York. Is that
Yes, my mother just watches CNN all the time and worries about us. But the point I was going to make is we have a show that's coming up that's going to be all about tools, right? We want to dig into the people who are the founders of Zoom and what are they learning? How are they changing? How are different media coming together, and how are tech companies adapting? That's going to be a big part of what's coming up. And we ought to tease some of the stuff that's coming up. And next week we'll have Steve Glickman on the show. Steve was the guy who created the Opportunity Zone program. That's one of the biggest ways of investing in the future of our cities and economic development. Kind of created that under Obama, but it got executed under Trump. Well, now here we are in the middle of the largest stimulus packages and the largest reconstruction of our cities that's about to happen. So we're going to turn to Washington to talk to an economist about how that works. We'll be talking to the leader of a company that's been in the medical apparel business. So they were in the business of kind of branded, customized gowns for your medical center. Right now, they're now in the supply chain business of N95 masks and part of that whole global supply movement. We're going to be checking in with artists. A lot of communities like Pittsburgh and San Francisco are giving emergency grants to artists largely because events were canceled. But how are artists responding? What are they created? What's going on in minds and studios in reaction to this? You already see a lot with music. You could argue that the Vietnam War was about protest. World War II had patriotic music. We're beginning to see a lot of irony in today's moment. So we're
a little bit of gallows humor, irony, and some other things now. It's interesting to note that during the 20s, Andre Breton and the Dadaists, who created things like the exquisite corpse, if you've ever heard of that, which is a methodology that we use in groups remotely to poetry and develop new art. And that led to the Surrealists. That was all during a time kind of this weird reaction, rebuilding after World War I. And there was an anarchy movement. There was sort of a lot going on right there because they were just trying to figure out what mattered. And I suspect that that's part of what we'll probably see from the art community is what the heck do I care about anymore? And what should I care about? And how could this absurd thing be happening? And what the heck is going on? And I think art is almost the opposite of science, right? Science tries to compress down to equals MC squared, but art is the incompressible. It is what Bannen said at the beginning of this conversation a little bit of just how big the human experience is. And we don't want to compress it. Like that's not the point of a novel. That's not the point of a piece of painting or a beautiful dance is not to get to the end. It's not Cliff Notes. It's the richness. And food, I mean, we only have it for that moment. So it's all about being in our brains. It's all memories and family, which is so different than the sort of feeling like I've got to be on this meeting. I've got to be in this call. I've got to do that stuff. So I can't wait to see that episode as well. Mostly this show is about us inviting people we'd like to hang out with and talk to, and we're very lonely. So we just figured we're just going to do it and share with everybody.
And there's a strategic reason for this. Huh?
Say that again,
I say Peter and Mickey, it's been a pleasure being here. So thank you so much.
This has been fun. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody. This is, I don't know, this is like the 5th time we've done it. We're 2 weeks into it. We're going to get better about booking things ahead of time. At least I think I called you up last night around 8. And not only have you been on, but you cooked up a magnificent tuna a la Quarantime.
Dinner.
Anna, we're going to get back to the Brussels sprouts. And so I want to thank, and Mickey, thanks again, and let's continue all of this. This is a remarkable team
and
effort.
Mohib and Omid in the background. Mohib's been doing the editing. He's normally with Amazon Web Services, but we had him on our first episode because he was actually saying we've got a lot of stuff going on with people doing dance parties where a DJ is DJing and people are sitting in their houses dancing together. And Omid has been making all the technology work and getting everything going. He's, I think, maybe somewhere between his parents' house in San Francisco, trying to navigate to get here this weekend. But we really appreciate everybody who's jumped in on this.
And by the way, another cool thing is the distributed workflow here. If you watched last time, the internet crashed. Comcast has been out to my house 5 times running new cable and testing things, and we had no idea if it was going to work. So I was prepared to go and back up on an iPhone, and Mohib has actually been directing the show, calling the shots and switching from Phoenix, just because we needed distributed redundancy here. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for this amazing team effort. Anna, thanks very much. We'll see you soon. Elise, I look forward to getting together in person. And when we see each other in the real world, it's going to be a lot more than whatever it is. We're going to go French. Mick, we'll be in touch very, very soon. And to everybody else that's kind of watching here, look, the whole idea behind this is that whereas we are socially distanced, this is a powerful, creative moment. I don't know about you, but I feel in a way busier than ever since there's so many efforts that are going on. I want to thank Erica and her whole team for helping us sort all of that out, which is what we talked about earlier. I want to thank Bannen, for really lending that great perspective on digital transformation. Elise, thank you again for the cooking wisdom, and to our whole team. We'll be back on Wednesday with the next Quarantine. Thanks, and have a safe weekend.
Let's get close, but not so close. You can share from a distance for a time. You know we want to see each other. You'll have to stay in your quarantine space while we try.